There are calls for the remains of this man, Joseph Merrick, also known as the Elephant Man, which have been kept at Queen Mary University of London for over a century, to be buried in his hometown of Leicester.
Joseph Merrick's life was a medical mystery that baffled Victorian England, but the true enigma wasn't his condition. It was the story the world was told. Many people are crazy about the heart-wrenching film, but it's a fantasy. The real Joseph Merrick was not a simple-minded victim.
You look at every single picture of Merrick when he was alive, he's always looking to his left. Every single picture. And I've gone back and looked at every known photograph and even drawing.
He was a writer, an artist, and a man whose family secrets were buried with him. Now, over a century later, his niece has unearthed the truth Hollywood never dared to tell. Get ready, because the real story of the Elephant Man is one of love, betrayal, and a final secret that changes his legacy forever. Unpacking the famous lie. You see, the Hollywood narrative needed a simple villain and a clear hero. The villain was the freak show and its greedy managers who supposedly exploited Joseph for every penny. The hero was Dr. Treves, the man who gave him a safe haven at the London hospital. But not all things are what they seem. What if the freak show was actually one of the few places Joseph ever found a sense of community and financial independence? And what if the hospital, his supposed sanctuary, became just another gilded cage? These are the uncomfortable questions the movie never asks. The popular version of the story claims Joseph was an uneducated, childlike man who could barely speak. In one of the film's most iconic scenes, he is cornered by a mob and cries out, "I am not an animal. I am a human being." It's a devastating moment, but it's pure invention. The real Joseph Merrick was anything but silent or simple. He was intelligent, articulate, and a prolific letter writer. He had thoughts, dreams, and a sharp understanding of his own situation. The reason people struggled to understand him was because a bony mass in his jaw made speech incredibly difficult, not because he lacked the words. What many overlooked is that this man, portrayed as a helpless creature, was a skilled artist who spent his final years building intricate model churches out of cardstock, one of which is still preserved today. This single fact alone should make you question the entire narrative. A man with that level of focus, patience, and creativity is not the simpleton from the silver screen. The Hollywood story also paints a grim picture of his family life, suggesting he was utterly abandoned. It's true his stepmother was cruel and his father distant, but the idea that he had no one is a dramatic exaggeration. The truth, as his own family line would later reveal, was far more nuanced. But to make a blockbuster, you need a monster with a heart of gold. The film leaned heavily into the idea that his condition was caused by his mother being trampled by an elephant while pregnant. This was a wild, sensational tale that Joseph himself sometimes believed because it was the story told to sell tickets at the sideshow. It was a piece of marketing, a bit of carny folklore that added to his mystique. The truth is, his mother, Mary Jane, was a loving parent who passed away from pneumonia when Joseph was only 11. There were no elephants involved. There was just a boy who was losing his mother as his own body began to wage war against him. To put it mildly, his life was already a tragedy. It didn't need fictional elephants to make it more compelling. The real story, hidden in plain sight, was about a boy from an ordinary family whose life was derailed by a 1-in-a-million genetic fluke. The Hollywood story is easier to swallow. It's a story about good versus evil, compassion versus cruelty. The real story is messier. It's about a man navigating a world that wasn't ready for him, making compromises to survive, and finding kindness and cruelty in the most unexpected places. The legend of the Elephant Man became bigger than the man himself, obscuring the intelligent, sensitive, and complicated person who lived it. Now, a truth kept silent for generations is finally coming out, and it changes everything. Beyond the sideshow narrative. For over a century, the Merrick family history was a closed book. The world only knew the story told by his doctor and sensationalized by the press. But history has a way of revealing its secrets. A modern historian named Vigor-Mungovin, who is from Joseph's own hometown of Leicester, dedicated years to digging into the archives, birth records, and long-forgotten family documents. Acting as the voice for a family long silent, she is the niece who finally brings the real story to light. What she uncovered paints a picture not of a monster, but of a beloved son and brother whose life was shattered by circumstances beyond anyone's control. This is the truth Hollywood never told you. It begins not in a cage, but in a home. Joseph was born a healthy baby. For the first few years of his life, he was just like any other child. The bony growths and skin deformities didn't begin to appear until he was around 5 years old. The movie skips over this, but his mother, Mary Jane, was by all accounts a devoted and caring parent. She was a Sunday school teacher, and she was determined to give her children, Joseph included, a proper upbringing despite their humble circumstances. Can you imagine her heartbreak, watching her son's body begin to twist into something unrecognizable with no doctors able to explain why? This wasn't a story of a family ashamed of a monstrous child. It was the story of a mother's love in the face of an unthinkable medical nightmare. Many people are crazy about the idea that his family cast him out, but the reality is more complicated. After his mother's passing, his father did remarry, and his stepmother was undeniably cruel. She saw Joseph not as a stepson, but as a burden. It was she who forced him onto the streets to try and earn a living, knowing full well that his appearance would make it nearly impossible. This is where the story takes a turn that Hollywood completely ignores. The niece's research reveals that Joseph wasn't just a passive victim. He was a survivor. He tried desperately to work, first in a cigar factory, but his growing right hand, which was becoming a massive club-like appendage, made it impossible. Then he worked as a door-to-door salesman, but people were too frightened to open their doors to him. He was left with no options. His entry into the freak show circuit wasn't a story of kidnapping or forced servitude, as some versions suggest. It was a calculated business decision. It was the only way he could make a living and escape the crushing poverty and cruelty of the workhouse, which was the Victorian era's brutal solution for the poor and homeless. The showmen he worked with, like Tom Norman, were not the one-dimensional, whip-cracking villains of the film. They were businessmen in a strange trade. Norman later argued that he gave Merrick a way to earn a good living, far more than he could have made in any factory. He provided Joseph with a career and, in a weird way, a stage where his uniqueness was an asset, not a curse. The niece uncovered that Joseph was a savvy partner in his own exhibition, earning a handsome £50 a week. A fortune for a working-class man at the time. He was finally in control of his own destiny, and he put away enough money to dream of one day buying his own home. This was the man Hollywood erased, a man of agency, intelligence, and ambition, Joseph's hidden world. When Joseph Merrick finally came to live at the London hospital, the world saw it as the ultimate act of charity. Public donations poured in after a letter was published in the Times newspaper, ensuring he would have a home for the rest of his life. Dr. Frederick Trevis was hailed as a savior, and in many ways he was. He gave Joseph safety, stability, and medical care. But the thing nobody tells you is that this sanctuary was also a prison. Joseph was given a suite of rooms in the hospital's basement away from the other patients and the prying eyes of the public. He was safe, yes, but he was also isolated. He was, once again, an exhibit. Only this time he was a specimen for the medical elite rather than a paying crowd. Doctors and medical students came to observe him. He was a living, breathing case study. But what many overlooked was the vibrant inner life of the man living in those rooms. Joseph's mind was a world away from his broken body. It was here that he truly blossomed as an artist and a thinker. He spent countless hours building his intricate cardstock models, including a stunning replica of St. Philip's Cathedral. This required immense dexterity with his left hand, his only functional one, and an incredible amount of concentration. He was also an avid reader, devouring books of poetry and romance. He dreamed of love and beauty, things the world had largely denied him. He wrote beautiful, poignant letters to the people who showed him kindness, revealing a soul full of grace and gratitude. This was not the simple creature from the movies. This was a Victorian gentleman trapped in an impossible form. He developed deep relationships with the nurses who cared for him, who treated him not as a patient but as a friend. They would sit and talk with him for hours, learning about the man behind the deformities. You see, Joseph yearned for connection. Dr. Trevis, realizing this, began to arrange for visitors. The toast of London society, including famous actresses and even Alexandra, the Princess of Wales, came to take tea with him. For the first time, people of high standing were looking past his appearance and engaging with his mind. Can you imagine what that must have felt like for a man who had spent his life being stared at and feared? He was finally being seen as a human being. Yet there's a sad irony to it all. He could never leave the hospital on his own. He was taken on secret trips to the countryside and to the theater, but always under the cover of darkness, shrouded in a special cap and veil to hide his face. He was free, but not really. He had found acceptance, but only within the confines of his rooms. His existence was a paradox. He was surrounded by kindness, but lived in profound loneliness, a celebrity who could never walk among his admirers. His life was a performance, whether on the stage of a sideshow or in the quiet theater of his hospital room. He had everything he needed except the one thing he wanted most, to be normal. A legacy in bones. Joseph Merrick's life was defined by the immense weight of his head, which measured a staggering 36 inches in circumference, the size of a man's waist. This enormous burden, estimated to weigh nearly 22 pounds, dictated how he lived and ultimately how he passed away. Because of its sheer size, he could never sleep lying down. To do so would risk cutting off his breathing or worse, snapping his neck. So every night he slept sitting up, his head resting on his knees. It was a difficult and unnatural way to rest, but it was the only way he could survive. On the night of April 11, 1890, at the age of just 27, Joseph Merrick made a fateful decision. He decided he wanted to try, just once, to sleep like a normal person. He wanted to lie down in his bed and experience the simple peace that everyone else took for granted. It was an act of quiet desperation, a final grasp at normalcy. But his body, as it had his whole life, betrayed him. The weight of his head was too much. Sometime during the night, he dislocated his neck and passed away peacefully in his sleep. When Dr. Traves found him the next morning, he realized that Joseph had essentially been a victim of his own profound wish to be ordinary. For decades, this was the accepted story, but the mystery of his condition lived on. What was the strange ailment that had so radically transformed his body? After his passing, his skeleton was preserved for medical study, becoming his final, silent exhibit. For nearly a century, science had no answers. The old tale of the elephant was pure fiction. Another theory was neurofibromatosis, a genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow on nerve tissue. But even that didn't quite fit the extreme bone growth Merrick experienced. The truth would have to wait for the dawn of modern genetics. It wasn't until 1986 that scientists, examining his preserved skeleton, came to a new conclusion. They now believe Joseph Merrick suffered from an incredibly rare condition called Proteus syndrome. Proteus syndrome is a genetic mutation that causes a massive, chaotic overgrowth of bones, skin, and other tissues. It's a 1 in a million diagnosis, so rare that there are only a few hundred confirmed cases in the world today. Joseph was one of the most severe cases ever recorded. Finally, there was a name for his suffering. This modern diagnosis, combined with the historical truth uncovered by his niece, allows us to see the full picture. We see not a monster, but a man battling a catastrophic genetic lottery. We see not a victim, but a survivor who navigated an unforgiving world with intelligence and grace. The story Hollywood told was simple. The truth is a complex tapestry of family love, societal cruelty, medical mystery, and one man's unending quest for a place to belong. His story wasn't just about a strange body, it was about the enduring strength of the human spirit inside. The world remembers the Elephant Man, but thanks to his family's long-lost story, we can finally know Joseph Merrick, the man. But does reclaiming his humanity excuse a world that gawked at him? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.